Wagwan, everybody. Welcome to the Dis Affamie History podcast, where we'll be speaking about history and as well family history and how history relates in terms of Caribbean people for the present as well as in the past, and how in the past what that does and brings forth for what we are going through at present and what we can learn from our history, from our family, and take that moving forward. So I do hope you enjoy the podcast, and if you like it, please ensure to subscribe, like, and review. Thank you. Welcome back to Dis Affamie History Podcast. I'm your host, Wendy Aris, where we center Caribbean histories, voices, and the many ways our stories are preserved across generations. Today's episode reminds us that not all archives are written, some are spoken, some are performed, and some are passed down through voice. Across the Caribbean, storytelling has long been one of the most powerful ways we preserve memory. From yard stories to stage performances, from elders' voices to contemporary platforms, these narratives carry history, identity, and ancestral knowledge in ways that traditional archives often cannot. And in today's digital age, that tradition is evolving. Joined today by Kesha Christie, founder of Talkin Tales and host of the podcast Walk Good, a space where stories of culture, community, and lived experience are shared, preserved, and reimagined. Through her work, Kesha continues the legacy of Caribbean oral storytelling, transforming it into a living, breathing archive. One that exists not just in memory, but in performance, connection, and voice. In this conversation, we explore storytelling as a form of archival memory, the story of oral tradition in preserving Caribbean histories, and how platforms like Walk Good are shaping the future of how our stories are told and remembered. Because in the Caribbean, storytelling is never just entertainment, it is preservation, it is resistance, and it is legacy. So let's have a listen. Thank you so much for everyone for returning back to the podcast, Dis Affamie History. This is our Season 8 last episode number 16, and we have today as a guest, Kesha Christie. She is a TED Talk speaker, as well as a storyteller with Talkin Tales, and has a podcast called Walk Good. So let's start the podcast. Kesha, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited about our conversation.
Yes, definitely looking forward to it. And we'll just start with the fact of, you bring African and Caribbean stories to life through oral storytelling. Mm-hmm. What first inspired you for this journey?
Fear.
Okay.
Well, I was afraid of public speaking. Mm-hmm. And so my journey was a selfish one. I wanted to improve my ability to do public speaking. And so I joined Toastmasters, and, I was bubbling along and doing very well as a motivational speaker. And I decided to do a manual that they had, storytelling. And I was like, I could do that. That's easy. And the very first project was Tell a Folktale. And I was like, I'm Jamaican. Folktales are in my blood. And when I told my first Anansi story, my connection with the audience was just something that was hard to explain, but it felt deeper. Mm-hmm. I felt more connected. And the feedback that I got from there was just so impactful. I thought, okay, I'm a storyteller. And when I looked around, I remembered when I was growing up, there was, Sandra Whiting, Ida Sadu, Rita Cox. But as I got older, who was telling our stories? And then I had to say, why not me? And from there, that's the end of it.
So would you say that was your particular path? That really was the little flame or light that decided for you to go down this journey?
I always had a little bit. I was always telling stories of all kinds of things. I just didn't take it seriously or from a professional perspective. And then finally, when I had this experience, I thought, I am a storyteller. And sometimes you have to tell yourself what you are until you believe it. And the second story I told was just like, wow, no, this isn't I'm not kidding. This is a real connection. And my pastor was looking for some entertainment for Black History Month. And I said, I'm a storyteller. And he called my bluff. And he said, send me a video. And so that was easy. I was in my mother's basement. I recorded the video. And then he said, okay, we'll come and speak in front of the church. And I was like, great. But I sat at the back of the church. So now I'm at the front of the church and I realized that there's like 300, 400 people in this space. And as I walked up, it was almost like I could hear Miss Lou in my ears say, open your mouth. And so I walked up on that stage and I told the Maya Nancy story with all my heart. I got the laughs when I was supposed to get the laugh. The confidence just felt like it infused as soon as I got to the top of the stage. And how was it that my little self could reach out to 300 some odd people and have almost individual connections with each one of them through the story I told. And that was when I realized, okay, I might have been getting clues all the while and not been listening, but now I know for sure that this is my path.
Yeah. And, for you, for the word griot, carries a lot of meaning, and it's coming from West Africa traditions. For the listeners that may not be aware, what does griot mean?
Griot or griot is a storyteller, but storytellers have many hats to wear. They're the keepers of history. They knew everything about individual families, about villages. They were advisors. They were teachers, musicians. They wore so many hats, but the key was they held the stories of the village. It held the stories of the nation, and they were able to share that back to the community. And before there was TV and books and all those things, we gathered in circles to listen to story because it was the stories that taught us how to live among each other and with each other.
Yeah, they're just pretty much the memory that is just being archived back, and they're being the resource that we tap into to kind of find anything.
Definitely.
And so for you now, in today's age, how do you continue onwards with storytelling?
The premise is the same. We're keeping the memory, we're sharing the stories, and we're still learning how to live with one another even now. And so our stories are so important, especially that the narratives are easily changed, easily influenced. So the written word isn't necessarily something we can always put our faith in, but those oral stories, those community memories that are passed down through community as well as from one generation to another, those are the things that live on. Yeah. We have proverbs that I heard growing up, my mother heard growing up and told me, and I'm still, the further back you go, you realize how far back those proverbs go, how far back those lessons really stand, and we're still telling the stories that are still relevant today.
And would you say that for communities that if we happen to lose these stories, what is the risk from now and, of course, in future generations if we were to ever lose any of these stories?
We lose our connection. We lose our understanding of ourselves as well as other people. It's how you navigate in the world. Language is so important. When babies are born, they don't understand whatever language you speak, but they understand your tone and your facial expressions. And then they watch how you speak and share stories. If you're not sharing those stories and they're just getting their information from flashy screens, they're not retaining it deeply. Stories land deeply. They take us where conversations can't and where logic doesn't reach. And that deep connection is something that we need to feel like we belong. And so losing that would mean we end up distracted, disoriented, and unfamiliar with the world and ourselves.
Yeah, because I'm sure with all of that, what you mentioned in terms of the voice, of course, the energy as well that's brought in there and the references to whatever facial expressions are being presented at that time, we would lose that connection to know that is part of us, that is part of our identities moving forward. And now, at this point, would you be willing to tell a story so we can kind of have what your normal process is for being able to tell a story, and then kind of let us know what what that story means.
Sure, I can definitely do that. I'll tell the story that I shared yesterday at an event. And it is the tale of two buckets. Now, long ago, there was a water bearer, and he lived high up in the mountains. And every day he had to go and collect water. And so he would take two buckets. Now, one of those buckets was perfect in size, in shape, and the other had a crack. Now, every day he would take water from the river and come back to his house. Now, the buckets spoke amongst themselves, and the perfect bucket would look at the cracked bucket and say, "Why are you even here? You can't do what you're supposed to do. And why does he keep picking you?" The crack bucket thought about it and started to internal all of that and got really frustrated one day. And so when the water bearer came to pick up his two buckets, the crack bucket said, "Why do you choose me? Do you not see that I have a flaw? Why do you choose me? I can't even do what I am made to do." The water bearer looked at the crack bucket and smiled and said, "Tomorrow, when we go to the river, tell me what you see." The next day, the water bearer came. He picked up his two buckets, the perfect one and the cracked one, put it on a yoke over his neck, walked down to the river, filled the two buckets, and walked back up, but this time a little slower than usual. And for the very first time, the cracked bucket noticed flowers. Beautiful flowers. And so when he got back and he rested down the buckets, he looked at the cracked bucket and said, "Well, what do you see?" Cracked bucket said, "I saw flowers." "That's right. When I saw that you had a crack, I planted seeds along the path. And every day when we come back from the river, your bucket is half empty. But you watered those seeds, and now there are beautiful flowers." And the cracked bucket thought to itself, "Wow." But unbeknownst to the bucket, it watered those seeds that became flowers. Those flowers fed the bees, and the bees made honey that the water bearer was able to collect and sell and share with those in the village, so everyone was able to eat. So now, the crack bucket, who thought it had no purpose, no use, and couldn't do what it was made to do, found out that it was doing so much more than it could have ever imagined. And those are the reasons why we tell our stories, because they hold so much power.
Wonderful story. And for you, what has it been for you to be a storyteller, to be a griot? And what has it activated for inside of you?
Wow. It is a great responsibility. I think of myself as a bridge to community, to culture, to our stories. And a lot of the times our stories are told by folks who don't look like us and don't share the same experiences as us. And therefore, when they share our stories, they're dry or they're rigid. They're still good stories, but nothing like talking about food and starting to understand how, a bowl of soup can just make your toes tingle. And, if you haven't experienced it, you can't share it. And so it does give connection. It helps you to connect deeper. And being able to show our expressions, tell stories, and stand in front of an audience and, point the way we Jamaicans do. Yeah. And everybody laughed because they know exactly what it means. It needed no further discussion. Those kinds of experiences have just caused me to grow and just fall in love with our culture over and over again, and realizing how important it is for us to continue to share our stories and our lived experiences, even in the diaspora, to connect us to home, to connect us to each other. And so for me, it's been about growth. It's been about falling in love with culture over and over again and standing firm as a bridge to be able to share stories, answer questions, and be that landing place for people to share their memories with so that I can carry those memories into the next room and the next audience and the next.
And you said something as well that, it's with these stories, it creates a safe space in many ways, and it allows people to kind of embrace their culture, because at times here, especially in the West, here in North America, that's not as well received at times more than anything else. But, that is, again, part of that connection that you're talking about, where people can feel connected. And for you, do you tell your stories in the Jamaican language, the patois, or is it just in, regular English?
Of course, I tell stories in patois. What I try to do is weave it in with every story that I tell, so that I have kids who are born here. They get the language they're familiar with, but then they get that sing-song rhythm of their mother tongue sewn into the story, and they're like, "Wait a minute, I've heard that before," or they like the sound of it, so they like to repeat it. So it's important for them to still get that experience, and it always depends on the audience. If I'm in an audience where I know, okay, full of Caribbean people. I can just go all out. And so I just engage when I tell the story, depending on my audience. But I love to weave it in so that not just children from the Caribbean to hear it, but children from the world to hear it, because we are exposed. Canada is a mosaic, right? And we've got all these beautiful languages. Our language is beautiful too. Whether it be our voice, our body, our movement, it's all a part of it.
And I'm glad that you say it is our language. It's something for us to be proud of and to be fully aware and fully embrace as well.
Absolutely.
And, for you, since you do talk to a lot of young audiences, what would you like for them to be able to take away after, telling your stories?
I want them to see that their voice matters. It doesn't matter where you were born. We all have a lived experience. And the stories that we listen to and the stories that we share help to build on those experiences. And so even when you feel like, I don't really have anything to say, understand that the world is waiting for what you have and the way you're going to share it. So I hope that when they listen to the way that I tell stories, and whether it be the riddles or the song or whatever connects with them, to understand that my voice is powerful. And it doesn't matter if I speak straight, if I speak with patois, if I speak loud or soft, it matters. And it's important to share it.
Absolutely. And what would you tell, I guess, everyday people that, what is their role in preserving, like especially for families, for parents to be able to retell these stories? What advice would you give to them to be able to say to their children, how, like especially Anansi stories?
Tell the stories. And Nancy is one of those characters where children connect so well with him because he's flawed. But then we think that the story has to be perfect. Just tell the story. Tell what you remember. Tell what you forget. Tell the little part. There's something that happened in the middle, but I don't remember. And you can look it up together. The stories don't have to be at a set bedtime. It could be you're washing the dishes and you have a laugh because you remembered something. Share the story. Share the experience. This is how we get to play with our language, embrace our experiences, and those Anansi stories end up tailored to your lived experiences. Just share the story.
Yeah, because it just, as a child, hearing those stories, I mean, it just opens up your imagination, right? Because it's told one way, but then you can think of, okay, what does that look like?
Yes.
And it just opens up as I said, just opens up your imagination and your thought process to be able to go, wow, okay, where do we go from there?
Definitely.
And, Kesha, as we come to a close on this episode, what thoughts do you want to leave the listeners in regards to storytelling with Anansi stories, or just regular stories?
All stories are important. Stories allow us to connect, like I said before. It takes us to places where conversations can't, where logic can't reach. They open our minds, they open our hearts, and they become the bridge that connects us to one another, connects us to our culture, and really connects us back to ourselves. When we see ourselves in a story or in a character, we connect so differently, so deeply, that it's important for us to continue to use our voice and share the stories. But understand this, the more we listen to stories and the more we tell stories, we keep creating all of these bridges that when we look at our future, we see that we all belong. We all have stories. Every culture has stories. The way we tell our stories, a little bit different. Yeah. We have music, we have vibe, we have body language, our plays, all the things. They're so important because they help us to connect with our identity. And identity is key. Once you feel that you belong, once you know that you're a part of something bigger than yourself, man, your world opens up and we want to see what you have to offer. So continue to share all of your stories, but continue to listen to them too.
Well said. Well said. So thank you so much, Kesha, for coming on and being able to speak to this, because sometimes to kind of understand and get the backstory for someone presenting stories and what that carries is a different type of a road to take. So, but thank you so much for coming on.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
As we come to the end of today's episode, we're reminded that storytelling is more than an art. It is an archive, a bridge, and a way of carrying memory forward. Through the work of Kesha Christie, we see how oral traditions continue to hold space for our histories, keeping them alive, dynamic, and deeply connected to community. In a world that often prioritizes written records, storytelling reminds us that our voices, our performances, and our shared moments are just as powerful in preserving who we are. And before we go, we have something special for you. As a bonus, Kesha Christie is going to tell an Anansi story, one of the most beloved storytelling traditions across the Caribbean and the African diaspora. So stay tuned, listen closely, and enjoy the richness of that experience. Thank you for joining us on This of Me History podcast. Keep listening, keep sharing, and most importantly, what good.
Well, Anansi was a collector of all kinds of things. He would collect clothes, shoes, boots, and on Sunday, he would go and collect Sunday dinner from everyone's house in the village. No, Anansi was collecting these things because he wanted to become rich. But he knew that collecting old clothes and boots were not going to get him there. He needed to find something that everyone needed so that he could charge them big money. Well, he sat to think about what that could be, and he sat and think for days. He think and think and think, and some say he think until him stink. Well, the idea finally came, and Nancy heard his neighbor ask a friend for some advice, and that's when it hit him. If Anansi had all of the common sense in the world, then everyone would have to go to Anansi to get a little piece of that advice. And Anansi would charge them big money. So Anansi set out to collect common sense. He started with a scandal bag. And he started to pile in the common sense. But scandal bags do what scandal bags do. That bag got a little hole that became a big one, and woo, the common sense started to ooze out. So when Nancy decided that he would be environmentally friendly and pack it all in a paper bag. Now, the paper bag was good, but when that paper bag got wet, it split in two. So there was Anansi scrambling to find a place to put all of his common sense. Well, Anansi is very resourceful. He found himself a large calabash with its hard skin and piled in all of the common sense inside. Now, no worries about it falling out. When Anansi was satisfied that he had collected all of the common sense, he covered it and started to look for a hiding place. He went high, he went low, he went east, he went west, still looking for the perfect hiding place. Well, Anansi remembered something his mother always told him. When you're looking for something, always start at home. So when Anansi made his way back to his house, right there in the backyard is where Anansi found the hiding place, a tall eucalyptus tree with its broad branches. So when Anansi went to work, he spun a web around his belly and around that calabash and he started to climb. 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, boom, he fell. 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, boom, he fell again. He kept climbing and falling and climbing and falling until all the neighbors started to gather in his yard. See what this foolish spider was up to. Up, down, but no one said a word. That's until she arrived. Shelly Ann was the cutest little 5-year-old that you had ever seen. She made her way in front of all those grown-ups with her pink Sunday dress and her big pigtails. She took one look at Nancy and knew what the problem was. She said, "Nancy." When he looked down, he thought to himself, does this pitney not see that I am busy? Well, when Anansi looked down, she knew that she had his attention, and she said, wouldn't it make more sense to put the calabash on your back so that you can climb easily and freely? This made Anansi mad. The kind of vexation that caused his skin to turn red and steam come out of his ears. Anansi grabbed that calabash off his belly and flung it to the ground. When it hit, it shattered and common sense took flight. It went east, west, north, south, and all around the world. So if you ever wonder why it is that in every part of the world, both big and small, there's a little common sense, well, that's easy. It's Anansi make it. Jack Mandora, me not choose none.
Hoped you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please make sure to like, follow, subscribe, and write a review for the episode wherever you listen to your podcast. Thank you.